Black music gave America its wildest freedom. Rock and roll screams, blues confessions, jazz elegance, gospel fire, soul seduction, disco release, and R&B heartbreak. But the music was often freer than the artists. Labels, churches, managers, radio, and gossip columns sold a narrow fantasy. The preacher, the ladies' man, the polished crooner, the masculine idol. Behind that fantasy, some artists hid, softened, or blurred who they loved. And one refused to disappear, turning visibility into its own kind of thunder. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there. Little Richard. He did not just play rock and roll. He detonated it. Tutti Frutti, Long Tall Sally, and Good Golly Miss Molly sounded like a door being kicked open. The hair, the makeup, the piano attack, the gospel scream, the grin, everything about him made freedom look loud. Young performers copied him. White radio borrowed from him. Rock history could not escape him. But the public saw a wild pioneer. The private man lived inside a war between desire, family, religion, and the market. Richard spoke at different times about attraction to men and women, about being rejected by his father, and about the church pulling him back toward shame. He also contradicted himself across decades, which is exactly why his story should be handled with care. That mattered because early rock still needed black genius to be thrilling, but not too complicated. Managers could sell danger, they could sell rhythm, they could sell a flamboyant performer as entertainment. What they could not safely sell was a black star refusing every rule about masculinity and sexuality. So Little Richard became both proof and prisoner. He helped invent rock's rebellion while fighting for permission to be fully free. That is why he belongs first. His story is not a footnote to rock history. It is one of rock history's central contradictions. Johnny Mathis. He made romance sound polished, safe, and eternal. His voice floated through Chances Are, Misty, and decades of candlelit albums like it was built for slow dances and living rooms. Columbia could market him as elegance itself, handsome, controlled, emotional, but never messy. The brand was simple, tenderness without trouble. That image traveled through television, nightclubs, Christmas albums, and family record collections. That is what made his private life so delicate. Mathis spent much of his career as one of pop's smoothest romantic symbols, yet he kept his own romantic world carefully guarded. In a 1982 interview, he acknowledged homosexuality as part of his life, and years later he spoke about the backlash, including threats. Here is the complicated part. Even when a star told the truth, the public did not always know how to hold it. The industry had trained listeners to hear him as everyone's dream man, not as a full person with his own boundaries. His silence was not emptiness. It was protection, strategy, and survival inside a romantic marketplace. The man who sold romance to millions had to survive the danger of being seen too clearly. Bessie Smith. She was called the Empress of the Blues because she sang like nobody could command her. Her records carried poverty, sex, betrayal, humor, rage, and survival. When she sang Desire, it did not sound polite. It sounded lived. In the 1920s, that alone was dangerous for a black woman selling records to a segregated country. She was glamorous, rough, wealthy, funny, intimidating, and human. She turned pain into public authority, and in the world of early black blues, that mattered. Biographical accounts describe Smith as having relationships with both men and women. She was married to Jack G., but her sexuality and independence did not fit the respectability story that outsiders wanted from black women performers. Touring blues culture could be looser, louder, and more honest than the mainstream market around it. Backstage, queer desire could exist. On the public stage, it had to be coded, laughed off, or buried inside performance. Smith's power was that she made forbidden feelings sound ordinary, but freedom on the road did not erase racism, sexism, or commercial control. She sang desire with brutal honesty, even when the world demanded that black women make themselves smaller. Billy Strayhorn. He was the quiet genius behind some of jazz's most elegant architecture. Take the A Train became a signature sound for Duke Ellington's orchestra. Lush Life carried the ache of sophistication, loneliness, and memory. Strayhorn wrote like a man who understood beauty and exile at the same time. His melodies could sound urbane on the surface and devastated underneath, but his genius lived in a shadow. Accounts from historians and musicians describe Strayhorn as openly gay within trusted circles, including parts of Ellington's world. That did not mean America was ready to market him that way. Jazz could celebrate cool, nightlife, genius, and coded intimacy. But a black gay composer in the mid-20th century still faced limits around authorship, credit, and public image. Ellington's name became the marquee. Strayhorn often became the hidden engine. He was essential, beloved by those who knew the music, yet not always given the broad public mythology attached to the band leader. His story is not only about sexuality, it is about erasure. The person who helps create a sound then watches the world remember someone else first. He wrote elegance into American music, while history kept too much of him backstage. Teddy Pendergrass. He was sold as Heat, first with Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. Then as a solo star, he became one of soul's most intense masculine fantasies. Close the door, turn off the lights, and his women-only concerts made the message clear. Teddy belonged to desire. The industry did not just sell his voice, it sold access to him. His growl, his body language, his stage lighting, and his audience all reinforced the same story. Then came the rupture. In 1982, a car crash in Philadelphia left him paralyzed. The accident also brought public attention to his passenger, Tenica Watson, a transgender woman and nightclub performer. Pendergrass never publicly framed that night as proof of a sexuality label, and it would be reckless to pretend the full truth is simple. But the gossip machine did not need truth. It needed a crack in the image. That is the cruelty of the sex symbol brand. The artist is allowed to be desired, but only in the direction the market approves. Once the story escaped management control, speculation became part of his public mythology. One accident exposed how fragile a manufactured fantasy could be. The tragedy was not just the crash. It was the way speculation rushed in where humanity should have been. Luther Vandross. He became the voice people trusted when they wanted love to sound perfect. Never too much, here and now, a house is not a home. His songs turned longing into velvet. At weddings, anniversaries, and lonely nights, Luther made devotion feel sacred. He was not marketed as dangerous. He was marketed as the man who understood the heart. That made him intimate to millions of strangers. But his own private life stayed protected. Friends, journalists, and later documentaries have discussed his sexuality, while his family and collaborators have also emphasized how fiercely private he was. Vandross did not publicly give fans a simple label to consume, and maybe that is the point. The industry loved him as the king of romance, but romance was easier to sell when listeners could imagine themselves inside it. For a black male balladeer, especially one marketed through tenderness rather than swagger, exposure carried risk. Female fans, radio programmers, tabloids, and executives all had expectations. Even kindness from the audience could become possession. So he sang love like confession, while keeping his own love guarded behind silence. The voice was public. The vulnerability was real. The full story belonged to him. That silence can feel mysterious to fans. But for an artist living under constant projection, mystery could also be the last private room. Barry White. He built one of the most powerful heterosexual fantasies in popular music, The bass voice, the orchestral swell, the slow-talked seduction. Songs like "Can't Get Enough of Your Love, Babe" and "You're the First, the Last, My Everything" made him sound less like a singer and more like desire itself. He did not whisper romance. He commanded it. That image was a machine. For White, the reliable public record is strongest on the brand. Marriages, children, romance records, and a persona built around masculine seduction. Claims about private complexity have circulated, but they should not be treated as confirmed fact. What is clear is the pressure around a figure like him. His entire commercial identity depended on women believing the fantasy, and that fantasy became part of how his records were heard. A label could sell the deep voice as bedroom authority. Radio could sell the mood. Television could sell the smile. Album covers could sell the promise before the needle even dropped. But any deviation from that fantasy would have threatened the product. Barry White's story shows how profitable desire can become a cage. The lover-man image left almost no room for complexity. James Cleveland. He helped build the emotional language of modern gospel. Known as the King of Gospel, he brought traditional black gospel together with soul, pop, jazz, and mass choir power. His music did not just entertain church audiences. It moved them. It gave people a way to cry, shout, testify, and survive. Choirs followed his arrangements like maps, and singers learned from his emotional timing. But gospel carried a different kind of pressure. In that world, sexuality was not only a publicity issue. It was spiritual, communal, reputational, and moral. Later accounts and gospel historians have described Cleveland's sexuality as an open secret, while other parts of his legacy include serious allegations and disputes that must be handled carefully, not turned into spectacle. Here is the complicated part. The black church could be a refuge against racism and a place where queer people learned music, discipline, and belonging. It could also demand silence from the same people who helped create its sound. Cleveland's story forces the hardest question. What happens when the music saves people, but the institution cannot openly accept every person making it? In gospel, silence was not only protection, it was survival. Sylvester. Then came the artist who did something most of this list could not safely do. He refused to disappear. He was not the hidden figure. He was the glittering reversal, a black, openly gay disco icon whose falsetto turned "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real" into liberation on the dance floor. The look, the voice, the confidence, the San Francisco energy. Sylvester did not ask permission to make queerness visible. He made the club feel like church and the stage feel like testimony. But visibility had a cost. Disco was mocked, queerness was policed, and black queer flamboyance could be treated as disposable once the party ended. For many listeners, his music meant release. For the industry, that release was easier to exploit than defend. During the AIDS crisis, Sylvester used his platform for activism. After his death from AIDS-related complications in 1988, he left future royalties to San Francisco HIV and AIDS charities. That legacy matters because he was not merely performing freedom, he was building it for others in public with no apology. Sylvester did not hide, and that made him revolutionary. It also made him vulnerable in a world that loved the sound of liberation more than the people who embodied it. Marvin Gaye. He sang like a man trapped between body and spirit. What's going on made protest feel prayerful. Let's get it on, and sexual healing made desire sound wounded, tender, and searching. He was the sensual prophet, the Motown rebel, the voice of conflict. No one made pleasure sound more spiritual, or spirituality sound more bruised. His music carried war, ecology, sex, divorce, prayer, and collapse. And conflict followed him. This is where the record gets complicated. Later claims and biographical discussions have raised questions about same-sex experiences or hidden desires, but Gaye never publicly confirmed a simple identity label. What is documented is already heavy enough: religious upbringing, public sensuality, emotional struggle, drug use, family conflict, and a violent death at the hands of his father in 1984. The important point is not to force certainty onto him, it is to see the pressure around a black male icon whose music exposed longing while the culture demanded clean categories. He could sing contradiction, but he could not escape it. Gaye sang about healing while living inside contradictions that never fully healed. His voice asked America to feel more deeply than America allowed him to live. These stories are not gossip. They are about an industry that profited from black genius while demanding a marketable version of black identity. Were these artists protecting their careers? Or was the industry protecting the fantasy it forced them to sell? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell for more untold stories.